You're listening to the Lightworkers Collective Podcast, Episode 3. And in this episode, I'm really excited to be bringing Violetta of Temple of Starfire to you. She's this incredibly eloquent person. She's a priestess, she's a witch, she's just this incredibly intelligent and well-spoken human being that manages to bridge the gap between being extremely tangible in this world, while as well bringing in non-cognitive knowledge, wisdom that spans across our tangible bodies, that spans generations and energetic boundaries. It's so interesting. She's going to talk to you about the Akashic Records. She's going to talk about the Priestess Archetype and this concept of temple culture and what that means. I'm really excited. I just listened to the episode in order to make sure that everything was okay, and there literally was nothing to cut out. It is going to be so much fun for you guys. Now, she's actually about to release a new program, which is called the Soul Path Process. It's 4 months, and if you're interested in working with her, make sure to check out the show notes. I've put the link to her website up there. Now, without further ado, welcome to today's episode. Welcome to the Lightworkers Collective Podcast. I'm your host, Noémie, and I am so honored that you have pressed play today. I'm fascinated by the infinite ways by which our inner light shines out, and created this podcast to remind you of your own inner connection to all that is. My hope is that this episode will assist you in your personal spiritual journey. All you need to do is be open to receiving what is present here for your highest good. Thank you so much for listening. Now let's get started with today's episode. Hi, Violetta, and thank you so much for joining us on the Lightworkers Collective Podcast. It's such a pleasure to have you on, and I know that the conversation is going to be so incredibly fun and multifaceted because you have so much to offer to the world, and you share so much and so many different aspects of yourself with the world. So why don't we get started by you kind of telling us what it is that you do right now and who it is that you are in broad terms, and we'll dive right in after that.
Hi, thank you for inviting me. It's an honor to be talking to you. I am a transformational trainer, intuitive mentor, and currently I am building Temple of Starfire. Temple of Starfire is the new name of my business. For years I have been operating under my own name. And earlier this year, in March 2019, I received this name. And I got so clear that it's not about me. And I no longer wish to center myself. Not that I was centering myself, me, myself, and I know it's not about that, but I feel that there is a resurrection happening, a resurrection of temple culture. And so many of us are now coming in touch with some deeper archetypes, magical archetypes, and healing lineages that we carry both in our soul history and in our bloodline and in our DNA. And for me, this is all about the priestess blueprint and resurrecting priestess lineages and supporting others in owning their magic and walking this world as beautiful, magical, rising cosmic leaders that Lightworkers are.
I love this. This is so exciting. Now you've said a few things you've said a lot of things in very few words, is what I meant to say. Now you brought up the concept of temple culture. Now I actually don't know what that is. And so I'm assuming that I'm not the only one. Would you mind kind of telling us what you mean by that?
Well, it's a great question because I guess I'm also finding out because it feels like it is something that I am remembering. So it doesn't live in me as a cognitive knowledge. I'm not coming at it from a perspective of a historian. So I guess there are so many way more qualified people who are historians and who would be able to tell you in greater detail about, let's say, temple culture in ancient Egypt and so on. But to me, it is a remembrance of a way of being. And when I refer to temple culture, what I'm referring to is how we treat the mystical and how we cultivate the presence of the mystical in the mundane. It is, to me, all about a resurrection of ancient wisdom and how that ancient wisdom can become more magic. How we can use such things as ceremony, rituals, elements, and all the beautiful things that were part of daily life for people ages ago. How we can build our businesses as temples, how we can treat our homes as temples, and even our relationships as temples. So to me, it's all about weaving something really sacred and deeply spiritual. I would not even call it spiritual. I'd rather call it esoterical and mysterial. How to weave that into our everyday life with all the reverence and respect and depth that it deserves, as opposed to spiritual bypassing or consumerist spirituality of just, okay, I bought a crystal and now I call myself a priestess. So, yeah, so to me, temple culture is all about making it sacred and deep.
Wow. You have touched upon something that you haven't maybe voiced. It's the concept of doing versus being. You were talking about spiritual consumerism, and it is a sense of doing. I'm doing this, and so then it's okay, and this and this. Whereas the way that you've been describing that sacredness around bringing that temple energy and reverence, it's really about slowing down. I don't think we can do that quickly. The way that you are talking about it, it's very deep, very meaningful, and very much an inward process from what I gather.
Yeah, you're so right. And personally, I'm very challenged with slowing down because I'm someone who is really fiery by nature. I have a lot of fire in my chart. I'm a manifesting generator. So, I can really get so excited about ideas. And I'm a go-getter, like I can make things happen. And this year has challenged me to take my time with Temple of Starfire, to give it the space to become what it wants to be, instead of imposing any type or any trace of the hustle culture, that I need to launch something, that I need to have a launch date, or I need to put something out there. And yes, to me, it's all about being and doing. And with that, it's also about being really radical in how we live. And it's a radical act of reclamation to decide that I am going to put my inner work first. To me, this is what makes a priestess a priestess. It's about everything that actually happens in silence and in solitude. Everything that does not get shared on Instagram, everything that does not get discussed. It's the inner state and that inner self-mastery that goes to deep places, dark places, raw places, but also very real places.
Thank you for honoring that part of ourselves. I find it extremely important. I value it very much. And in a way, it makes sense because I believe in it, that I would attract other people on the show that would also believe in it. But it's important to cast a light or on our shadow and on the balance that is needed in the way that we approach our own growth or our own becoming, our own returning to the self in whatever way, we label that. And I very much love all of the words you've been using. There's so much richness and beauty in how you're approaching, what is becoming the Temple of Starfire. It's surely going to be a beautiful little baby of yours, which is going to grow into an incredibly powerful space.
Oh, thank you. I wish that it turns out that way, indeed.
Oh, I have no doubt. So another thing that you brought up when you were talking about the temple and temple culture is this idea of archetypes, and in particular, the priestess archetype. Would you mind talking to us a little bit about what you mean by archetypes and what is particular about the priestess archetype? I know you got started on it, but I would really love a deeper dive.
Yes, so the word archetype can also be seen as a template or a blueprint. So I'm going to explain it through using the concept of a blueprint. Let's say in architecture, there are blueprints for a building, and they outline certain ways of how things work and how they are structured. And we all have blueprints in our energy and on the level of our soul. And those blueprints are noted in what is referred to as the Akashic Records, which is the infinite field of knowledge. It's like the morphic database, non-physical database of the universe. So when I'm referring to the Priestess Archetype, I'm actually referring to 3 dimensions of the Priestess blueprint. On the one hand side is the dimension of the soul, meaning you have been a priest or a priestess in ancient temples in your past lives, if you allow for the concept of reincarnation. So you have been that. And I would even dare say you are that, because in the Akashic Records, time is non-linear. There is really no separation between past, present, and future. So just conceive of the possibility that on some level you are being in service at some temple, maybe in Babylon or in India, in ancient Egypt, somewhere right now. So that's why you feel resonance, because this is the soul level. I've recently discovered it in my Akashic Records, and I was quite stunned. I'm still processing this info, that I have around 500 priestess lifetimes. And I was like, come on, you cannot be serious. So I checked it several times, and they were like, yeah, what do you expect? And I mean, it's all happening in parallel. And I have been in this intuitive work for several years, but somehow, 5 years ago, this info was not revealed to me. I'm only receiving it now that I'm really stepping into deeper level of commitment to the priestess path. So this is the level of the soul. I say there are 3. So the second one is the bloodline, the ancestral level. It is carrying a particular template or archetype from your family. It simply is in the blood. So it is also genetic information that will be running through you. And just think of that. We all come from times long time ago. And perhaps maybe your ancestors were indeed serving at some temples somewhere. And the third level of blueprint or an archetype is the collective. It's us tuning into the morphic field of the universe. This is what Carl Gustav Jung in his theory refers to the collective unconscious. It's the sum total of humanity's notions, beliefs, paradigms, cultural practices. So it's just that big, vast field of data that we are all swimming in every day. And it can be so that you, let's say, travel to Egypt, you plug into that space and you connect with that archetype. And I think when you are strongly called to embody certain way of being or you get very emotional when someone brings up temples and being priestess, it means that this blueprint is running on one of those levels, or I would even say on all 3. And the same can be said about, let's say, the witch archetype, the alchemist, the warrior, heretic, and so on. And a fascinating reference would be the work of Carolyn Myss and her book, Sacred Contracts. If any of the listeners want to dig deeper into that, I highly recommend checking out Carolyn Myss and her perspective. So that's, I hope that helps understand the concept of a priestess archetype.
It really does. No one's actually shared it with me with such clarity. So thank you very much for taking the time to explain this. And for those of you listening and interested in Carolyn's book, I'll just make sure that I put it in the show notes. It might be as simple as an Amazon link. I'm not sure yet, but you'll be able to find it there. So if you're driving or anything like that while you're listening, don't worry, it'll be available to you in the show notes. There is one other thing that you've mentioned, and I know I'm asking you a lot of very direct, like, please explain these things to us questions, but that's because you're quite the expert and you are quite a master in the work that you do. Yes, she's smiling and she's not saying anything, but yes, you are. And one of the things that you are very masterful at is your work with the Akashic Records. Now, you also happen to be the first one talking about Akashic Records on this show. So,
Oh,
ta-da! Guess what? You're going to have to explain it to us.
Well, I love explaining things. This is the geek in me, my academic background. I happen to have a PhD in project management and cultural studies, so I really love getting academical about things, because I think especially in the spiritual community, we often throw those words out there, implying that everyone understands. But if you are new and you're overwhelmed with all the info, it's like, whoa, I need to make sense of that. So I love explaining those complicated concepts. So let me define the Akashic Records. The Akashic Records are the invisible database of knowledge about every soul, being, place, occurrence, event in the history of the universe that has ever happened or ever will happen, because there is no time in the Akashic Records. So the Akashic Records are like that invisible database or morphic field that we can tap into to retrieve information. So now, why are the Akashic Records becoming so popular these days? I remember when I just started offering Akashic Record work back in, I think, 2016. I put up a Facebook post where I made a little meme and I said, Akashic Records are the new coaching. I made it as a joke just because I used to offer coaching before, and I was like, okay, people know me as a coach, but now I'm also offering Akashic Records readings, so let me just make fun of it and be like, Akashic Records are the new coaching. And lo and behold, 3.5 years later, I'm seeing Akashic Records popping up everywhere. So I think they are indeed becoming the new coaching. And I want to explain why. Well, because very often we as spiritual beings, as mystical beings on our journey, we hit some dead ends where let's say we encounter a pattern in our life that we cannot explain and we cannot shift with any methods like coaching or psychology. And although coaching and psychology are very potent and powerful and they work, some things need to be accessed through the domain of the what I call trans-rational. So it's not irrational and it's not rational. I call it the trans-rational. So we need to go to the root level. We need to go to the domain of energy, to the domain of what are we not seeing? What is not rooted in childhood trauma? What is not rooted in family patterns? What is not rooted in the body? And then we through the Akashic Records, we can start digging deeper. It's like being a cosmic detective. So I say I work at the CIA, Cosmic Intelligence Agency.
That is awesome. And so I guess, yeah. sorry, I love what you're saying, but I just, sometimes because I am very much tuned into the Lightworkers Collective and who is listening and who will be listening, I heard a question and I want to make sure I ask this question. And the question is, how do you know it's real?
How do you know it's real? Well, I will respond to this question with a question. Who is asking? Oh. Yeah, so if you find yourself having this question, just observe, where is this question coming from? And I bet it's coming from the mind. It's coming from that place in us that wants to protect us from bullshitting ourselves, which is beautiful because that's the job of the mind, to analyze, to interpret, and to make sense of things. So the mind wants to ensure that it can rely on the data that it's been presented with. However, this question again is coming from a place that cannot access that domain. So it doesn't have the capacity to interpret that domain. You know what I'm saying? Is like the mind will never be able to understand where intuition is coming from, because you don't comprehend intuitive hits with the mind. You comprehend them with another place in you. And so you gotta take a leap of faith and be willing to have trust in yourself and to have trust in the very fact that there is a whole domain of guidance and domain of knowing, which is different from knowledge, the domain of knowing that is beyond our cognitive capacity as humans.
Oh, you use all the right words at all the right times, Violetta. Absolutely. And I think one of the things I'll add in that I just wanted to mention, there's been so many written or spoken, recorded accounts of someone talking about their past life experiences, whether it be actually through studies, of children that come in remembering who they were as adults, the incarnation prior. There's more and more evidence that is quote unquote scientific, that has been tangibly quantified, that there is maybe more than just this one experience. And the Akashic Records, in a very simplified way, and Violetta very beautifully explained it, but the Akashic Records is almost like your memory, but it's not just your memory, it's the memory of all things in all of your lives and all the lives of others. And it's beautifully parallel to a library as well. I've heard that term, and I really like that. It's almost as if you had your little book of your life in there, and then there's a little book of your other past life in there too. And it's nothing too much more esoteric than that. The term itself can seem a little bit exclusive, but it really isn't, and it isn't meant to be.
Oh, absolutely. I so agree with you. And see, nowadays, more and more programs are popping up that help people learn how to access the records. However, what I realized after I have been trained by my Akashic Records work teacher is that actually I have been tapping into this domain my whole life. And I do believe that many gifted healers and coaches that I have been working with or I have observed, they are indeed working with their Akashic Records. It's not something special or exclusive. It's just some people have their channel open and they can tap in easier, but some people maybe don't have that access in this life, or maybe some people don't even need it at this point, but it's available to all of us. It's just, I think it's also very important to be careful that the mystical knowledge doesn't fall into the wrong hands. Because if people are using it for just their monetary gain, or they're using it to fool people, yeah, it can get all very complicated and complex. So I think for many centuries, it was in the domain of the occult, and that's why we are still carrying, I think, in our memory as a collective, a certain, how would I call it? Like some of us are a bit fearful or cautious about that. We are like, okay, but prove it to me. Yeah, just because perhaps we have encountered instances where this knowledge was misused, or where it fell into the hands of people who were using it for the sake of manipulation, or who were using it for their own gain. So we need, I think, to detox from all that and to develop trust again, which brings me back to temple culture, where we bring back the sacred. We learn how to live in reverence and in respect, and how to cultivate safe and sacred presence of the mystical in our daily lives.
Oh, yes. It's a really important conversation, and it's a really important topic to keep in mind and to be mindful of as we develop our own discernment. What is something we are used to being afraid of? What is something, are we using what we have access to in a loving and kind way? And what does that mean to us? And what does that mean to others around us as well? Now, you have worked with a lot of people, as far as I understand, right? You have worked all over the world. Are you finding that depending on which culture you're working with or which country you're in at the time, that there are differences in how people react or maybe entertain the idea of either Akashic work or priestess work?
This is such a good question, because the answer is twofold, yes and no. I'm finding time and again from my work, because I used to lead coach trainings and personal development trainings in several countries. And each and every time, I was amazed to discover that human beings are all similar in nature, but also so different. It's like, it feels to me that we all have the same core. We have that same craving for being self-actualized, for being fulfilled, and for living a life that is authentic, true, and free. We just use different language for it. But then that core of who we are gets framed so much by the culture and the environment that we find ourselves in. So of course there are differences, and there are also systemic differences. Let's say I love South Africa. I spent a lot of time there. It's like the home of my heart. I love it, although of course I'm not South African, but this country is so dear to me. And when I'm there, I just realized, simply politically, economically, structurally, from the systemic perspective, there are communities and people and categories of population in South Africa who do not have access to this mainstream spirituality that we have, but they do have their own spirituality, their own culture, which will be very different in how it is being lived out. And say in Russia, there is huge interest for spiritual work. People are hungry for knowledge. But then when I'm leading, if I'm leading a training in Russia, I see that for many people, just from the Maslow's pyramid of needs, a lot of issues around survival are still coming up. People need to secure their survival, their material foundation, their monetary well-being, before they can afford to think about such things as self-actualization and purpose of their life. So we need to be very mindful of the fact that many of us are simply so privileged, and some people will never be able to explore temple work or Akashic Records or past lives simply because they are still fighting the daily fight of securing their family survival. So we, I think, are very privileged to be in that position, to be able to explore on this level. And I think we all need to realize that, and to not be too exclusive in our thinking. And that's not to say, like, oh yeah, everyone can build a temple at home. No, not everyone. And we need to be aware of that.
Thank you. Thank you for being so generous and so kind in recognizing the humanity of all of us. I know, and I don't want it to be, a trailblazing fight that I lead, but I know that every once in a while, when I hear rhetorics around the law of attraction, and it's all just what you think and what you feel that you attract, it can be a little bit dismissive of the truth of our starting points, right? The truth of where we live, the truth of who we are, and what is around us at this present moment, whatever that present moment may be. And sometimes it is difficult. For many, it is difficult. And to dismiss it by saying that's what they seeked out, maybe at a soul level, that is true. It was an experience that the soul seeked out. But in a very human experience, that still means survival, that still means struggle, that may mean a lot of pain. And dismissing that by saying very linear sentences I think it can lead our large circle of spiritual workers into trouble.
Oh, absolutely. I love how you pointed out. And I'm thinking a lot about the fact that spirituality, especially consumerist spirituality, as I call it, and New Age culture, they very often lack nuance. They lack the discernment and the subtlety. And I think nuance can be everything. I saw on Instagram, I don't know who said that. If anyone knows who said that, please let us know. Have you seen the saying, did she manifest this, or is this white privilege? It's a quote that is going around on Instagram. And I don't know the source. I wish I could quote and credit the source, because I think it pinpoints the issue. Did she manifest this, or is this white privilege? It's very easy to manifest when you are sitting in a luxurious house. You can afford a coach, you can afford a healer, you can afford to clean your Akashic records, and smudge yourself with sacred plants that are on the brink of extinction. It's very easy to claim that we have manifest, and that's of course not to diminish anyone's work and personal efforts, but we need to be aware of things that are going on for others, and just to take responsibility for that.
Yes. Oh, I like the word nuanced. Thank you for using that word, because it's also very, very kind and very generous, because the last thing we want to do is start having these sorts of factions of beliefs, belief systems, which is in essence what religions have come out to be, these different factions of I am right, no, you are wrong, no, I am right. And that's not what this whole expansion into gosh, into the 2020s. I don't know how else to explain it. That concept of ascension, of a new earth. That's not what we're about. We're about becoming more inclusive, but also understanding, yes, that there are nuances to that inclusion, that it isn't inclusion of a singular experience, but it is inclusion of such a varied mosaic of humans, of experiences. It should be infinite by the scope of what I understand Source to be. The experience of humanity should be so multifaceted that each of them should be unique, and it should be an infinite amount of options.
I totally agree. And thinking of the temple culture, the phrase comes to mind now that the new temple culture will be the exact opposite of the cult culture. Because as the organized religion has been building very patriarchal cult culture, where if you're not with us, you are against us. And this is the way to do things, this is how you do ceremony. And quite paradoxically, what also comes with that is greater responsibility for our training and for our education and for how much time we take before we start making offerings in public. Nowadays, it's just so easy to present a very put together front on social media where you cannot tell if this person is the real deal. And that, I think, creates the danger of deeply spiritual and intense concepts being misused.
Now I have a question for you based on that, and that is, how can you tell? Like, the concept of discernment is one I plan on revisiting over and over and over again on the podcast. But to you, I know we talked a little bit offline before starting to record about centering practice that you use. To me, the idea of being able to discern whether something is for our highest good, whether something is in alignment with ourselves, is something we can understand and find from the space of the heart. And I was hoping you could take a few moments to explain how you go through a practice of discernment, and if that centering practice you mentioned to me earlier is one that could help us get there.
Yes, before I go there, I want to say what is strongly coming now as a message for anyone. Perhaps someone needs to hear it in a very blunt way. Stop lying to yourself. Stop lying to yourself. I'm really getting this so strongly from my guys and my higher self. Like, stop lying to yourself. It's for me, it's for everyone. Stop lying to yourself, because in truth, we always know. And I would like now the listeners to just visualize in themselves, their body as a vessel. See yourself as a pillar, because you are the Holy Grail. Your body is the Holy Grail. Your energy system is the Holy Grail. And it's your responsibility to be aware of what this vessel is getting filled up with, right? And because we are not solitary beings, we are always in relation and we are interfacing with the world around us. We pick up information, we pick up energy, we pick up stuff from the outside, and sometimes it clogs the vessel. And when we are clogged, especially when the energies that are coming at us get associated with our wounds or with karmic imprints in our system, it can become all very complex, and then we get confused. We can easily get manipulated by fake leaders. We then have trouble discerning what's the real deal, what is not. We chase the shiny objects, So I think it's always about the practice of, on the one hand side, clearing out what is inauthentic and untrue, and on the other hand side, getting filled up with our original essence, which is unique for each and every person. So how I do it is, this year I've been traveling a lot, and I'm very sensitive, and I notice how I easily pick up stuff from the environment. And I was looking and experimenting because none of my practices were working. So this year I stumbled upon, let's say, what I call centering practice. In a way, just unfolded for me. I wouldn't say I came up with it, because it's nothing special. It's not like, a special practice or anything. But how I see it is, It has several steps. So first, we need to have safe, sacred containers for ourselves. So when you're doing a practice, let's say centering practice in this case, first and foremost, create safe space. Close the door. Shut out the distractions. Go somewhere where you can just be with yourself and visualize that you are sitting within a circle. I always cast a circle around me. Sometimes I even move my arms and just define the space around me and about me with my arms stretched out, as if I'm just drawing in the air that bubble. So I'm defining my space, and I make it very intentional. I'm intentionally declaring that, okay, now I am going to do a little ritual, a little practice, my centering practice. This is my space, and now the practice will begin. So it needs to have a very clear beginning and a very clear end. So then next, I just tune in and I allow my breath to guide me deep into my inner world. I just notice how am I feeling. I check in with all of my bodies. So if you're listening to this, you can do this now. Just check in with your physical body. You can scan yourself from the top of your head all the way down to the toes, noticing what is moving and not needing to change it in any way, simply noticing. And then when that is done, move into the mental body, just noticing how is your mind doing? Is it clouded? Is it empty? Is it running somewhere? And again, not needing to change the thoughts or to change the pace, just observing. From there, move into the emotional body. Feeling everything that you're feeling. Very often we are so quick to give names to our emotions. And in this practice, I invite you to not name anything that you are feeling, because that will take you into the mind. Just simply feel it. Feel it as a sensation. And you will notice that the only thing that the feeling wants to do is to be felt. That's the whole purpose of feelings, to be felt, not to be named or analyzed. Not necessarily. Well, yeah, that can be fruitful in certain regard, but for now, just feel it. And then allow yourself to feel the dimensional connection. We are always connected upwards to higher realms. It's like the upper chakras, and just notice how you are connected upwards. You can, even if you want, decide to open wider if you want to receive guidance, allowing guidance to stream in from above as if you're standing under a cosmic shower. And just allowing yourself to stand under the cosmic shower and letting it cleanse away whatever is not needed. But then also noticing the connection downwards to the earthly plane. Perhaps even visualizing a grounding cord or like an anchor, as if you're a boat anchoring down to the core, and from there breathing. So this, in the mystery schools of the past, this was called the pillar of light, our connection downwards and upwards. And then knowing that we are within that pillar, and we are here with all the centers, mind, heart, womb. And I'm saying womb, and I mean that gender neutral, because womb is an energetical center. It's the same as the sacral chakra, the second chakra. That's where our life energy dwells, and that's where our kundalini dwells. So I simply refer to it as womb, but you can refer to it as anything, the creative center. And to me, being centered means awareness of all levels, awareness of connection upwards, downwards, and then being centered means how can you embody yourself more fully? How can you inhabit this vehicle of your human body, this genius technology for being alive that a human body is, and being in it fully, in all the chakras, not just in the heart, or not just in the sacral, being everywhere. Then I feel it's more holistic. It's like then you can feel everything within you. And then what you can add to that practice is like you're pulling all your power back. You are calling yourself back, calling your energy back from all the spaces, dimensions, relationships, situations, places. It's like you are like pulling it inwards and just feeling all of yourself. Feeling sometimes even your inner contradictions. Feeling your callings, feeling the subtle whispers and the loud voices, feeling it all. And breathing and finding your center, finding your core. And from there, allowing trust to come. Trust that you are enough as you are within yourself. And from there, wow, even from talking it out, I now feel more centered just because I've just been talking about it, and just notice a difference. And from that place, you can make your decisions. From that place, you can discern and ask questions. So I have this practice written out. I even recorded a short guided meditation. It's on my website in free access. People don't need to sign up for anything to get it. I wanted to make it as accessible as possible for anyone who wants a quick comeback to themselves. It's just I recorded a 7-minute version, and it's available in open access if you want it.
Perfect. We'll make sure to have this on the show notes as well so that it's easily searchable for you guys. I know I feel so much better. I didn't even know I was holding any tension, but I feel so relaxed right now. That's a very powerful, very simple as well practice of noticing all the aspects of the self. And I didn't actually do any energy work right now. I wanted to just listen to what you had to say, and just by noticing a lot of the aspects of myself realigned. And wow, if you don't even have to feel like you need to be a master energy worker, you just notice, and that's all you need to do. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and what I want to say is, see, this is just one of the many ways of doing this. I came up with this from experimenting and trying out what works for me. I would encourage the listeners to experiment, because your energy system is unique and there is no dogma. Yes, there are 7 chakras. I'm not going to dispute that, but everyone might feel them slightly different. Maybe the traditional colors are different for you. Maybe you prefer to connect downwards first and upwards second, or the other way around. So I would encourage everyone to trust themselves above trusting any external authority, because you are perfectly attuned to serve yourself and support yourself. You just got to spend time with yourself in a very intentional way. And the last step would always be to thank yourself for taking a moment to get centered and to declare that your space is now, the ceremonial space is now closed. So I'm very particular about containers. This is an alchemical habit, because alchemy is all about clear, defined containers, the beginning and the end. I even do that always in my sessions with clients. I always open in a very intentional way with a little ceremony and close in a very intentional way. And it's the same when I'm doing work with myself. And that simply protects your space and allows you to keep your energy contained. So you're not like walking after your meditation or after energy work, you're walking into a supermarket with all your chakras all over the place. Then you end up picking up stuff from the environment again and feeling clogged. So I just wanted to emphasize how important it is to close the space after we've done the practice.
So can you repeat how you close this practice of centering?
So I would suggest you close that by just taking a moment to thank yourself for taking this time to come closer to yourself. And you can simply say internally, the practice is now complete. I am ready to emerge and interact with the world again, or something like that. I am back. Sometimes I even say, I am back, I am back, I am back 3 times. And then just visualize that you dissolve the container, you dissolve the bubble, and you are present and available for life.
So very simple. And again, very much what works for you. So you get to experiment and find out what makes you feel like whatever you just did is complete. These words that Violetta is offering, or words that you may find online if you've been researching, or that another teacher or a coach or a mentor may have, or even something you've read in a book may have said, they don't have to be the words you use. That's the beauty of your own spirituality, your own journey, as Violetta was mentioning. It's yours. It's yours to craft.
Indeed, indeed. And I do believe that when we come back to ourselves, our best revelations come from direct personal experience. This is known as Gnosticism. The Gnostic tradition of your direct relationship with the divine. That's what I believe in, and that to me is a huge part of the new emerging temple culture. Temple is not a space where you come to seek something outside of yourself. It's not the place where some authority is going to tell you how to relate to God or goddess. It's actually the space where you come to be welcome, and the space within which you can cultivate your own direct revelationary relationship with the divine.
no matter what background you may have, or spiritual or religious understanding, cultivating something specific to yourself, I think even just as an experiment, you may find that it's incredibly rewarding. Now, we're nearing the end, and I have enjoyed so much everything that you have shared with us. I wanted to ask you just a few more things, because one of the aims that I've had with this podcast not only is for you to share the wisdom that you hold, which you've done so eloquently with us today, but also ask you a little bit about your own spiritual journey. And we didn't even get into that at all. So I was just curious about anything that you may want to share with us if you tune in, and see if there's anything in particular that you think might help our listeners.
Thank you for this question. I really appreciate this question, as it gives me an opportunity to reflect on my past. And the more I get asked about this, which happens quite often lately when I'm on podcasts or when I talk to people, I come to appreciate my childhood more and more, because I was, as I always say, I was born with the veils between the worlds open. I was born with certain psychic abilities, and I am one of those people who remembered past lives as children. And the thing is, I talk about it very calmly because I don't have a point to prove. It's not a party trick. I don't need anyone to believe me when I mention this. That's why I'm very comfortable mentioning it to people. I talk about this very openly, even with people who are not into spiritual stuff, because I take it as my job to own it. I'm simply relaying the facts. So my spiritual journey, I think it started before I came here. It was all contracted. It was all meant to be. And I think as a child, I was so genuine in it and so open. But then as a teenager, I had to socialize and fit in. And just naturally from hormonal development and whatever, the channel got clogged and it closed, but not for forever. I reconnected with it when I was, I think, 17. I stumbled upon a deck of tarot cards at a mystical shop. Now, I'm very lucky because I grew up in a family that was very philosophically oriented, let's put it this way. So my grandfather was a big lover of philosophy, so I grew up reading classics and reading his favorite was to give me Jean-Jacques Rousseau to read. Jean-Jacques Rousseau essays for a 12-year-old. How is that? So that's how I grew up. And there was a lot of respect for history. So I grew up going to museums and looking at all this ancient Egyptian stuff. So it kept the connection alive. And my father is deeply spiritual. He's into yoga. He was into yoga during the last years of the Soviet Union, when those yoga books, they were forbidden. So he was reading them. He got them undercover. And, when I was 15, I discovered his yoga books. And I read it. I remember I twisted my body into impossible knots. I had horrible muscle pain the day after. That's why it's so memorable. And then with my dad, we went to an esoterical shop, which was one of the first esoterical shops that opened in Moscow in the early 2000s. I can't get the word right. That opened in the early 2000s. And there was a whole shelf with tarot cards. Now, nobody ever told me about tarot cards, but I gravitated towards them, and I was like, I have to have this. So my father bought me my first tarot deck and a book. We bonded right away, and lo and behold, like a month later, I was giving readings to all of my friends, and even my mom's friends, and even our neighbors. And it was crazy accurate. And that ignited my mystical self again. And I told my mom, I guess I don't want to be president, or I don't want to work for the United Nations, which was my intention because I was studying international politics. I was like, actually, I want to be a witch. And she says, you're crazy. No freaking way. She said, that is not a good job. This is not a good career path for an unmarried young woman. That's what she said. But once a witch, always a witch. You can't undo it. So although I did study international politics, and later on I pursued the academic path, I won scholarships, and I did my PhD in cultural studies and project management, and then I discovered coaching, it was always with me. And then when I started to work professionally as a trainer and coach, I got more and more intuitive. I would just be on trainings delivering material that is spiritual but not esoteric. And I would just get flashes when I would look at some participants. I would get flashes of their past lives. Of course, I wouldn't tell them because it was not part of the curriculum that I was teaching back then. But I was like, whoa, what is this? So I was reading, I was studying, I found mentors, I took courses, and it all unfolded from there. And I guess I reclaimed my childhood wild psychic self.
Wow, that's so beautiful. I really have been appreciating throughout, just in the collective, the Lightworkers Collective, how varied our experiences, our childhoods are coming into our own selves and understanding our own intuition and connection to the divine. It's been so varied, and yours is incredibly interesting and so fun and unlikely. I don't think when I was a kid I even thought that being a witch was a possible job. I love that you just claimed it. That's great.
I was like, oh, okay, I can see myself earning money. I think I should have charged all those people. I would have been rich by now, for all those readings that were so accurate. And I look forward to writing more about my story. I know I am meant to write a book about this, and I know I need to make time for that. I haven't made time for that yet, but I'm just speaking it out loud so I can hold myself accountable, okay? I promise now on the Lightworkers Collective Podcast that I'm going to write a book about my psychic and spiritual experiences and my childhood and my story. So it's coming.
Awesome. So how can people reach you to make sure they hold you accountable?
Well, you can find me. One of the best places to find me is my Instagram, Temple of Starfire. This is where I share all the ins and outs. I post almost daily, sharing insights and thoughts as they arise. And on my website, templeofstarfire.com. That's where people can find me.
Awesome. Thank you. Now I have one last closing question for you. We just took a very, very quick tour of the past. Now, I really like talking about the future as well. I think that the idea of being intentional in what we want to create is an important one. And lately, especially in the past year or two, there's been a very prevalent thought in the woo circles about this idea that we are ascending to a new earth, and that earth is one we are co-creating right now. Now I am curious, if you were to describe to you what that new earth looks like, what does it look like?
Thank you for this beautiful question. It gives me goosebumps, and I'm even feeling some tears coming up because I'm actually, to be honest, I'm seeing a lot of duality. I'm seeing a lot of beauty, but also a lot of things falling away. There is a mixed feeling of loss and grief of the past, because I do see that the earth, in a way, is splitting into two. We are sharing the same physical space, and some of us are ascending and are committed to moving towards trueness and authenticity and love as the new blueprint. But some of us who are inhabiting this place are not. And I'm seeing that sense of loss and simply that grief of like, whoa, some people just don't want to. And I'm also seeing the beauty in that of accepting everyone's journey and not trying to force everyone to ascend with us. And I'm seeing from that a lot of codependency is falling away now. Lightworkers are being challenged to let go of codependency and manipulation and stop being the rescuer, because it only puts us into victimhood. I don't know what is this is now coming from in a kind of channeled way, but it feels it's important to share this. Maybe some listeners need to hear this, that we need to stop trying to rescue those who don't want to join us on the journey of ascension, and rather focus on what are we here to build, and taking it one day at a time, staying in the present. Yes, ascension visions are beautiful, but this work can only be done if we get our feet planted firmly on the ground, and if we get into full embodiment. Because if we want to inspire some people who are on the fence about spirituality and ascension, they need relatable examples. We need to come down from the clouds and step off the throne and get into real, embodied, relatable versions of ourselves without dumping it down. So it's not about dumping it down or creating consumer spirituality. It's rather about taking highly elevated concepts and deeply, deeply getting them to such a degree that we start radiating it. And when people come into contact with us, they feel it. They don't need to read a complex spiritual text. When we get it, it's easy for us to share it. And to me, the new earth is about deeper embodiment, less fancy words, more clarity, and more trueness.
Oh, wow. Thank you for that. It's something to ponder. I will definitely be listening again to what you just said, because I feel like you mentioned, it's a little bit channeled, if not a lot channeled. And there is a lot of energetic information in what you have just said. And what I mean by energetic information, for those of you that may not know, it's this idea that there is maybe a non-cognitive piece of information hidden away in the message, or not hidden away because it's fully within our grasp, but we don't get to embody it. We don't get to take it in from the place of the brain. We get to take it in from the space of the heart. And when we do that, then we need to be in a space that is heart-centered. And oftentimes, messages can be so multifaceted that when we revisit them, then what ends up happening is we may be in a different space of alignment, and we may be able to unravel and unwrap yet another piece of information. Just the same way, in a way that we may do that with written language. When we get older, we understand symbology better, but it's at the heart level, it's at the non-cognitive level. So thank you so much for sharing that with us, Violetta.
Thank you for receiving it.
And now, can you let us know what it is that you offer to people? And for those of us that are listening to you who may be interested in working with you, can you let us know what it is that you do and how we can work with you?
All of my current offerings are outlined on my website, templeofstarfire.com. And there are basically two things. On the one hand side, it's one-on-one sessions. And here, I believe that each and every person who has ever come to me, they have been sent to me on the other side, on the soul level. There is always some kind of recognition and resonance. And I call my sessions Starfire sessions, and Starfire is the eclectic priestess lineage that I'm building. And each session is different, and it is simply there to support you to step more into your magic and into your essence, into your truth. It can include energy clearing, guided journey. It can include Akashic Records reading. It can include coaching. So I always care for making it really practical. And instead of just me telling you what to do, I get you to do the work. So I do have very often messages to deliver from the soul level, from the Akashic realm, and I help people claim something that they know they're ready to claim. They just maybe are not sure how to do. It's almost like every session is like a little quantum leap, like a level up. So it's hard to describe. Maybe I'm not being very clear, but those who are drawn to this, they will come and they will recognize. And with some people, I work for a longer time, so I leave it completely up to the person. I don't offer specific packages or processes. I trust that it's all so unique that people will know how much support they need, so I'm very flexible in the way I work. And the second thing is I do regularly hold online classes and online ceremonies and group programs. And I love that because it is so powerful to congregate in a sacred way, especially I teach those classes around full moons or around solstices, equinoxes, those powerful, highly energetically charged portals during the year. And each class is channeled, and I always announce them on my Instagram, on my Facebook, and on my website, so for you to experience what I have to offer and to come in touch with the Starfire lineage, which is a particular lineage that is coming through this temple and through me. Well, be welcome to check it out.
Ah, wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm really excited for those of you that feel called to work with you, to have gotten a chance to hear about you and to have found you through the Lightworkers Collective. So thanks again for taking the time to contribute your heart and to contribute your wisdom and your mastery to this collective. It's been such an honor and such a joy to have you on the show.
I loved talking to you. Thank you so much for inviting me, and may this serve everyone who needs to hear this.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode today. I hope that you found something that you enjoyed in it, whether it's something you agreed with or something that made you think. I think that that's what is really important about this spiritual journey of ours, is that we seek out to better understand ourselves through others and through our own discernment, to get to understand what it is that is within our own hearts, what it is that is within our psyche, and what it is that we want to reach towards. So, as you know, we're the Lightworkers Collective on social media, so please, please, please feel free to reach out, okay? I have been a little bit quiet, but I just needed some inward time. I'm here now. I'm really excited to be back, and with such a powerful, powerful being. It's been such a great experience to have so many of you along for the ride. So please feel free to share the episodes, some of your learnings, anything and everything. This is totally meant to be a co-creative project, and you are part of this co-creation. And for that, I thank you, and I wish you a beautiful, beautiful day ahead.